politics. No, we are just like doing the same thing with what we was trying to do when we were in Cuba, just having our opinion, our opinion voiced, and just not being. So the idea I had was to write something about Cuba, because during many of my trips to Europe and also when I used to live in Mexico, I encountered many people who will ask me questions about Cuba, what is the situation in Cuba, and it was always for me very difficult to explain in few words what do I think about the situation in Cuba. The whole book I was thinking about to have like some kind of literary conversation about the Cuban Revolution, not political, not with the dignity of the literature, you know. Put the conversation, put the discussion on the level of something well done, and without any emotions being involved, without any attacks. So in my book you wouldn't find some like open attacks against the government, against because that wasn't my interest. My interest was to have a reflection about Cuba, but in this like in the calm, more calm way, more sereno.
Yeah, serene.
Serene way. Yeah. So.
And first of all, congratulations! It's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful article. You know, nuanced, insightful, funny, and for me it was very moving. You know, I think what's particularly funny is how you treat this sort of ineptness of the U.S. government and the ridiculous embargo policy. You know, moving in terms of the plight of writers, Cuban writers like yourself. You know, there are now hundreds of political prisoners in Cuba, many of them writers. You know, for instance, there are more than 20 journalists who were thrown in jail in 2003 when there was a big crackdown, and they're still in jail today, almost 7 years later. And their crime was basically doing what you did, which was expressing their views.
That's true.
Right? And you know, since then, you know, there's been a handoff of power from Fidel Castro to Raúl Castro, but that sort of persecution of writers continues today. If you were living in Cuba today, an article like this could result in you being thrown in jail.
I'm afraid, yes.
You know, that's the reality.
I think the most important for people from outside Cuba, they always see the situation like Cuba is confronting the United States in that sense. For them, it's very heroic. This situation, Cuba is like facing this kind of experience with taxi drivers. Every day you have this. They feel your accent, or they see you. You say I'm from Cuba. They will say, "Oh, Fidel is the only one who is able to say to tell the American what they are, and to stop. He stopped them." So, and I think this is the main like feeling all the time. So many people now they're starting to criticize Cuba, the Cuban government, and say, "Well, Fidel he's very old, right? And he's been there like for ages. So what's going to happen now? How's his brother?" And so, but always there's a big sympathy toward Cuba. That's very interesting, also. The situation now, I would say, it is better than it was before because now with Obama, I think he's doing a right thing. He's like not pushing it, and he's trying to have a conversation, to have like some connection.
Well, you know, I agree that the Obama administration has at least taken one important step in terms of removing some travel restrictions for Cubans. But unfortunately, the same policy, you know, the embargo, which you describe, you know, I think very well as you know, a totally inept policy. I mean, you know, it's hard to think of a single policy that has a longer track record of absolute complete failure, right? You know, it almost be comical except it's caused so much hardship to so many Cubans. And the only beneficiary actually has been the government. I mean, if the aim was to promote some sort of democratic transition, it didn't. It helped consolidate power. I mean, the embargo basically has served as the excuse for all the problems in Cuba, yeah. And worse than that, the pretext for the abuses against writers and journalists. And you know, as long as the embargo's in place, you have this dynamic, which you also described very well, and you know, that people see Cuba, or one thing that Fidel Castro did so effectively, you know, was to play the United States, and so why do taxi drivers, as you say in your piece, and many other people, hear about Cuba and they say, "Yay, Fidel"?
Yes, because
and you know, well-meaning, decent people, and I think that I think it's easy to understand because, you know, this sort of human nature. A lot of people, I'm sure most nation readers, you know, people who work in human rights, have you know, when we see a story of David versus Goliath, yes, our predisposition is to sympathize with David. Now, those people looking at Cuba, if they just looked at Cuba, the clear Goliath is the government, and the David is writers and bloggers and others, and they would sympathize with them. But what Fidel Castro did so effectively was invert the story, so Goliath became the U.S., and he and his government became David. And so people look at Cuba, and they see the Goliath of the U.S. They don't look at Cuba and see the victims of repression in Cuba. You know, on the issue of the bloggers, you know, information is going around, but you know, we've spoken with a lot of bloggers. They don't have great access to computers. In fact, there are bloggers who never even see their own blog.
Yes, that's true.
They don't have access. To get access to a computer, you need to go to, you know, where the tourists go. It costs $5 an hour, which is a third of your wage in Cuba. So there are always, and this is one of the remarkable things about Cuba. There are always people who, in those circumstances, were determined to find a way, but the consequences are very real, and there are, you know, real achievements in terms of, for instance, literacy, in certain, you know, important aspects of healthcare. We've seen that, and then big problems in other areas, and this is, you know, the paradox. For instance, when you have, you know, a country that teaches everyone to read and write, which is a great achievement, and then tells them they can't read certain things and throws them in jail if they write certain things, right? This is the tragic paradox, I think, of Cuba. But one thing that I found particularly poignant in the piece was you described your generation when you were still in Cuba and in the 80s, and of young idealistic people who were committed to the ideals of the revolution. Maybe you could describe a little bit, you know, what was it that you and your generation were advocating for, and what were the options that you faced then?
Yes, you remember that now we are celebrating like the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So that was the Perestroika years. So in Russia, and in Cuba also was a big many people were like thinking about how to improve the system we have, how to make like our own perestroika in Cuba. We were like very interested in introduce solutions and find solutions and introduce reforms to the system, to not to go to become a capitalist country again. So just trying to find, but I think the government was afraid of our initiative and was afraid of, and they didn't allow us to take part on any discussion, on any, you know. So we were like invited to leave Cuba, I would say. I don't remember if one of us is a political like a person right now. Just was trying to do what any writer or any artist will do in his own country, just trying to get his opinion listened and trying to voice our ideas about how to improve that, how to criticize, but not trying to overthrow the government, not trying, you know, just trying to function like an intellectual intelligentsia, that's Russian word, that do everywhere.
Wonderful job with this article, and I think people who don't know much about Cuba will learn a lot, and I think people who do know will also find it very,
Thank you so much.
very interesting.
Okay.